From Hypebeast Radio, I'm Jeff Staple, and this is The Business of Hype, a show about creative entrepreneurs, brand builders, innovators, and the realities behind the dreams they've built. Samuel Ross is one of the youngest, most exciting designers today. His brand, A Coldwall, is making headlines, I feel like every week at this point. Yes, that's him bringing in partners like Renzo Rosso from Diesel. Yep, that's him doing design projects with Oakley and Nike. And yes, that's him sandwiched in between Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell. In our first ever episode with Hiroshi Fujiwara, I asked HF what new brands he's excited about, and the only one he mentioned was A Coldwall. But where did he come from? 24 months ago, no one heard of A Coldwall. To most, this would be a telltale overnight success story. But I had a hunch that was not the case. I could tell this wasn't a trust fund kid with loads of disposable income or some hype designer du jour. I could tell something was going on that was deeper and more complex. I just didn't understand how deep this 26-year-old could go. So let's begin. First, I guess, introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah. I should start there. I'm Samuel Ross, and I'm the designer and founder of A Coldwall. I also run a contemporary homewares brand called Concrete Objects, and I've just launched a Coldwall sister brand, Polythene Optics.
Okay. Um, if uh, if I'm sitting on a flight with you and I'm a stranger, and I just lean over and I'm like,
Yeah,
hey, what's your name and what do you do? What do you say is your title?
it's difficult.
Do you get into it?
A little. I try to say, oh, I work in design rather than be like, hey, I'm a designer, because a lot of people use that title and it's quite wide
Yeah.
as well. I often say I'm a creative director.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easy way to kind of umbrella multiple fields.
Mm-hmm. And then so if I then say, oh, like you have your own brand, and then you say yes, and then I say, what's the name of your brand, right? And then you say a cold wall, and then
I say ACW
you don't go into cold wall.
because they say a cold war and it's like it's not war, and then it derails the conversation. I
Right.
just go in with like, it's called ACW, it's avant-garde,
Okay.
and usually that word steers them off,
The
or
word avant-garde.
yeah.
Yeah. Then they're like, oh, I'm
Yeah,
not cool
because
enough.
it's like moderately intimidating as
Yes.
well.
To a non-designer or
Yeah,
creative, right?
and I can slip my headphones back on if need be, or if I can tell they have like some moderate interest within the field,
Uh-huh.
I will probably talk about my background in like product design
Mm-hmm.
and installation art,
Mm-hmm.
and then move into fashion.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so when someone asks you why is it called the cold wall, what is the reason why?
Well, it's interesting. I used to actually like take the time to tell every single soul who asked me
Mm-hmm.
what and why it's named a cold wall.
Mm-hmm.
The dilemma I'd face is that it's a conceptual theory, so there's no straightforward, immediate answer
Mm-hmm.
without me going into, say, 200 words. So now what I've started to do is flip it. If it's someone who I can kind of sense is into the field or culture that we're part of, I would ask, have you heard of a cold wall?
Mm-hmm.
And spin it that way. And if they said no, I'd say, okay, well, I can point you to this link, and you can find out more about it in depth, to
Okay.
save myself giving like, a 2 hour speech every single time.
Oh, okay. And so on those links, what do you say?
They're usually like in-depth interviews I've
Okay.
I've done, but if I could, like, if they really have an interest in it and I am compelled to tell them about it,
Yeah.
I usually say that it's this case study that really looks at melting pot culture within dense areas, and it's this relationship between class systems explained through art.
Okay.
That's like the easiest surface level
Mm-hmm.
way, rather than saying, oh, there's installation and there's soundscapes and there's garments and there's like, a real tension within the movement and the garments. I usually say it's like a case study on class systems through art.
Interesting.
Hmm.
So maybe it might be interesting for me to tell you what I thought cold wall was
For
before I
sure.
heard the definition.
Yeah.
So I thought it was something that first had inspirations in architecture
Hmm.
and sort of buildings, but then also I felt like there was an inner city thing happening too, where it's like almost like housing projects
Yeah.
are a cold wall, and there's like a because there's like a physical wall, and it's cold because we're not in Miami or we're not like in Bali, right? It's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
inner city, which is like London or New York. And not only is there a physical wall, but there's also like an emotional wall that is hard to climb over if you're behind this cold wall. That was my impression.
That ties in really well to a lot of the notion because, of course, the references, the asymmetry, the material choices, and the
Yeah.
finishings all link back to the architectural
Yes.
notions of a lot of the time public housing or like Bauhaus movements or
Mm-hmm.
failed Bauhaus movements
Mm-hmm.
throughout like Europe and the UK, which of course is synonymous with any like capitalist city
Mm-hmm.
which carries the same type of tiered living
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Right. The
So
haves and the have-nots.
exactly. So
Yeah.
there is definitely a lot of that in it. And it's funny you say that because the name and notion and color palette initially originated from, I remember I must have been around 21 or 22. And I had moved back to my mum's house for like a few months temporarily or whatnot. I was still trying to figure it out. And this was just after I'd gone into working with Virgil and like the whole Donda team and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was like, really, I felt I had this confidence to tell new stories through design. And I wanted to make sure the story that was being told was more so a story I'd lived through.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to treat it as a case study. And I was literally just looking out the window of the neighborhood in which I grew up in, and it was entire like the idea came from the wall textures that surrounded me.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a very literal component
To the wall.
to the wall and to
Yeah.
the story, which
Yeah.
is that's worked out really well. But then
Mm-hmm.
there's this there's this introspective side to it, which gets into the idea of how architecture and these case studies can really carry an emotive intelligence
Yeah.
through them.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that quite interesting because, of course, the Bauhaus movement and post-modern, like 1950s to 60s British architecture feels quite desolate, but also quite synthesized and futuristic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about that and the failure of these areas that, to me, really carry a heavy emotion towards it.
Yeah.
And I really believe that architecture has an influence on decisions and choices people make and how they feel.
Yeah.
So those ideas, what I've tried to do is consolidate that into a clothing narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it can't just all fit in clothing, so there's the sound experience that goes in turn with that, or there's the use of installation art to represent tension
Yeah.
in other ways and how space can be used within the clothing sphere, but also as like a wider artistic viewpoint.
Right.
Which is why it's very difficult to just say or answer what a Coldwall is,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the whole premise was to start it as an art project
Mm-hmm.
and just see how it went, and it ended up being very viable as a business, which is brilliant, but it's still an art project in its core.
Yeah. It's very different. That explanation of a cold wall is very different than like when someone says it's a young men's brand, age 17 to 25.
Exactly.
And we do denim.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
it's like a little bit different.
Yeah, totally.
So it's not even. Do you even consider yourself a fashion designer?
At this point, yes, I do, because I design around, even outside of a Cold War. For the Cold War, I probably do per collection around 450 pieces now,
Mm-hmm.
and I do like 2 standardized collections a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like 900 pieces.
Yeah.
Then I do Oakley as well,
Yeah.
which I have a collection with, and I do around 40 pieces. I do like, of course, design for Nike and whatnot as well, and other brands.
Yeah.
So I would call myself a designer due to the sheer amount of clothing
That you
I have to output and design.
Yeah. Right.
And I spend every day doing it
Yeah.
with my team, if not independently.
Right.
So I would say that, but I would say that I'm a designer in the broader spectrum, as I enjoy developing clothing just as much as I enjoy developing installations and soundscapes and homewares.
Yeah. Right. And how old is the brand now?
The brand is 3.5 years old now.
Okay. And how old are you, if I can ask?
I'm 26.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got a young start.
Yeah, I did. I was like, I kind of knew what I wanted to do from young.
Mm-hmm.
I majored in graphic design and product design from when I was like 15 to 16. Got straight into college before going to university over here. Won my first like small design award when I was like 17 in college, and then I won a design award just as I graduated, which was awarded to me by the typographer. I'm gonna have to come back to this now. I can't remember his name. Eric Spikeman.
Okay.
Eric Spikeman awarded
A
me.
legend.
Yeah, the OG of like typography, and he awarded me with a signed red book of his, which was brilliant. And I just was scouted and went straight into product and graphic design at a commercial level.
Yeah.
So I worked commercially for around 3 years before moving specifically into design for clothing. So
When
I
you
was
say commercial, you mean like ad agencies? Or
yeah,
something
yeah.
like
So
that?
I was at a product design agency
Uh-huh.
in Leicester, and I was like doing homewares and cookwares
Uh-huh.
and like cutlery
Yeah.
and like web design for like Jamie Oliver, Grand Designs, walking like gritty design, like actual design that has no glory to
Yeah.
it.
Just commercial
Yeah, proper
stuff.
commercial
Yeah.
design. I think that's kind of bled through into part of my strategy with Coldwall, hence why it's grown, because I had a bit more of a commercial background.
Yeah.
Around that time, I had all these like esoteric short art films I was producing, which are still on YouTube now, which have like 10 views, which are from like 8 years ago that no one knows about, but it's all out there.
Right,
like
yeah.
it's all out there. And I had a street artist alias, and I was called Bitmap, and I was just pasting up these huge illustrations I was
Okay.
doing because my degree was in graphic design and contemporary illustration. So at that point, I could still paint. Not now, but
Yeah.
back then, I've
Yeah.
lost that skill. So there's always been this relationship, a working and professional relationship with design as a whole. I kind of knew I wanted to be in design before I was even really aware of the magnitude of fashion.
Right, right.
You know, because I couldn't afford these things coming up.
It's pretty astonishing that a young Samuel Ross living in the projects found himself exposed to things like advertising, fashion, graphic design, soundscapes, and legendary, albeit nerdy design heroes like Eric Spiekerman. This mixed bag of interest comes through in subtle tones in A Coldwall and his other projects. There's a consideration and intent in what he does. It's not obvious that this was inspired by that, but you know there are unspoken volumes behind his works. And when you consider the specific environment that Samuel came from, it's an even more amazing thing that he got to where he is at such a young age and in such a short amount of time.
That's all. I'm from the ends. So like my first encounter with like luxury came super late. My first encounter with like streetwear, we didn't even call it streetwear back then because it was just like a Nike tracksuit, Adi tracksuit. I'd buy fake Nike Air Max Limiteds off the estate for like £25 because there's no way I could afford a full pair, like an actual real pair.
Yeah.
And then I started selling fake Nike and Adidas when I was like 15, 16 out of my mum's yard. Like just selling it. Yeah, to all my friends and my boys or whatnot. And I found out, well, I always had this like passive relationship with clothing. I just wasn't aware it was really a thing.
Yeah.
Coming from like the background I did, there was an appreciation for art, but not for fashion because it just was completely out of our spectrum.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Fashion was just like a utilitarian thing you put on your body.
Yeah, it was a uniform.
Not a statement.
It was just like fashion to me was like a fresh Nike tracksuit, and I'd go to like TJ Maxx and like just fish through for any pair of Nike or Adi that I could put. I was like that type of kid. We didn't have any money, so it wasn't like, oh, I want the latest Adi. It was like I just want a Nike shoe. Yeah, I just want the tip.
If it had a swoosh or anything that looked somewhat like a
anything
swoosh.
slightly branded, I would like just like
Good enough.
Yeah, I remember like begging my mum when I was like 13 for this Nike school backpack, which is probably like 1999. She's like, we can't afford it.
Yeah.
Went down to Umbro, went down to Diodora, just any type of brand that had a decent logo. I just wanted to be part of.
Yeah.
And they would be like, well, what's wrong with you? But I didn't know I had this knack for, or a real understanding of branding and brand value from quite young.
Yeah.
You know?
It's interesting because I've actually, in a bunch of these interviews now, I've learned that a lot of people who are successful, I don't know if there's some sort of common thread, but they get their start in graphic design, a little sprinkling of product design, and then somehow that makes like for a really good fashion designer. Whereas I don't think I've interviewed anyone that like has been pure fashion from
went
day
through
one.
the old school.
Yeah, old school like draping and croquis and like That's really weird because I think when I see your work, I see a graphic designer's eye to it, you know.
Yeah,
And oh, the last person that I talked to about this was actually Yoon from Ambush,
I heard that one.
where
Yeah.
she's a graphic designer, and you could just see it in all her packaging and work and
It's the
everything.
visual ID and language is so cohesive when
Yeah.
it comes from like anyone who has a really specific way of communicating through graphic design.
Yeah.
And I think there's something, I don't know if it's like this shared global curriculum of some sort, but there's something there about producing for the real world that connects, and it's really about cohesion in visual language and
Yeah.
knowing how to create brands that feel real, like
Yeah.
this ability to know uh, what dots you need to connect to create the idea of a brand or an identity or of life through a product.
Right.
You know.
And I think that's what is the difference between a graphic designer and an artist, right? Artist, you could just make it for one person.
Yeah.
Graphic designer, by trade,
It's
you're making it for the
servitude still.
world.
Yeah.
Like you're serving. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you have to create things that work globally.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think like, you know, somehow there's like a real OCD-ness about graphic designers when it comes down to like kerning typefaces and tracking and, you know, using the right
Letter sets.
yeah,
Old
letter
school
sets.
shit. Yeah.
And I feel like if you are taking the time to kern your font, then everything else from the buttons to the zippers to the
Will be
fashion
aligned,
show will be
yeah.
aligned. But it comes down to that like atomic level,
No, for
molecular.
sure. Like that, like just really caring about every
Everything.
single dot, and it's really understanding the accumulation of several mistakes can lead to like a landslide in a brand identity.
Yeah.
And that being convincing on almost like a subconscious level. So
Yeah.
every dot does need to be aligned, every letter does need to be kerned,
Right.
every typeset does need to be perfect. Because if they're not, it's when you see this. It's like if you see like, you know, a piece of branding, not specifically a clothing brand, but any type of brand or any type of business, and if the communication is not quite right, whether that's through the graphic or whether it's through the actual language or copy that's used, as soon as you have an inclination of second guessing, the illusion's gone.
Yeah,
you know.
you're absolutely right. And for most people, they won't even be able to articulate what's wrong. They'll just be like turned off somehow.
It just doesn't feel right.
It just doesn't feel right. Yeah. Wow, it's really observant. To me, the amount of effort that goes into something that is just quote unquote well designed is very underestimated. I'm not even talking about groundbreaking or award-winning work. I'm just talking about like when you go to IKEA and buy a dope spatula. I mean, sure, there's a ton of research, work, and vetting that goes into something like that. But anything well designed is kind of like a house of cards. And as Samuel said, if one thing is off, one tiny little thing, it throws everyone off the trail. Oftentimes in a way they can't even perceive. It's like the difference between a Tesla and a Chevy Volt, or an Apple and a Dell, or a Nike and a Skechers. It's not simply about design quality, because that can be bought. Companies can pay more for higher quality design. It's really about consideration. It's the question of whether you as a brand owner or a creative even cared to consider to take that one thing to the next level. Do you feel old in this industry? Like to me, you said you're 26?
26,
26. Yeah. So your body is 5 years older than my whole brand. Right? Like you've been on this earth 5 years longer than Staple has been on this earth.
Yeah.
So I see you as like a real young buck.
Yeah.
But that has accomplished so much. Do you feel young or do you feel like a veteran in the game?
I don't feel like a veteran. I feel like I live in like a time lapse. But I definitely don't feel like a veteran. I feel like I've like probably now just started. I'd say like I've been in more pop culture in our field for like 5 years now. So I'd say I'm just starting, but I do feel like I'm really grateful to live in a phase of fashion and design where things move quicker.
Yeah.
As well.
Definitely.
You know, because I grew up literally like watching your YouTube documentaries and seeing the process of growing an actual design studio, because that was my primary interest before fashion, of course. So I feel like I'm just very grateful to live in a time where things can move quite quickly. I am aware that I literally just spent all my time working. So anyone who is involved in my life, as I said, from my wife to be to like my best friend Andrew, who's my business partner, to my right hand Yi, we all work together.
Yeah.
This is literally what we do.
There's no
there's
separation
nothing else
between personal and business.
No, there's nothing else.
Right.
So in that sense, I feel like I live in a time lapse, because where a lot of people might stop working at like 7 to 9 p.m. and then go out and turn up, I just keep working.
Yeah.
And it's been that way for a long time. Like when I used to work for like several people in the industry, I'd still be at the club with my huge tote bag prototype with my whole life in it, including my laptop.
Right.
So I'd be at the club, but I'd still be developing the artwork for someone else's show or something. It was always this thing where people would come to me to get work done because they just knew that that's all I really lived and did, which is how I kind of built up a decent portfolio list quite quickly, because I just worked. I remember being at like family parties and I'd get a call from like Tremaine, and it would be like, hey, Frank needs some like potential artwork, and we'd just like bang out 150 pieces of artwork for a single that one night, and I've got my whole family downstairs celebrating my cousin's birthday. And I used to feel like I feel bad for missing those moments, but this is what it also takes. I was aware of that.
Right.
And that artwork didn't even go through, which is fine. But it's more so
the process.
Yeah, it's the process, and it spoke really about like the diligence of living in that time lapse and living outside of a normal like day to day.
Yeah. You spoke about sort of the evolution of how your exposure to branding was really about like the whole Nike and Adidas tracksuit. When did like street culture / urban fashion enter your life?
It depends what phase. I'd say like it really entered from, of course, Air Force One, growing up with that shoe from age like 14, 13, onto the first ever New Era hat I bought when I was like also about 14. I'd say about the age of 14.
Okay.
Like my first ever like work placement was in a streetwear store.
Really?
Yeah.
Your first job was in a streetwear store?
Yeah, I was like 11. Like work experience in this store called Stars of London. It was just like.
And what were they selling?
New Eras. They were selling like Lot 29. They were selling No Fear, a small brand from over here as well.
Wow.
They were selling. I can't even remember a lot of the names now. They were like brands that existed for a few years at that point. It was still like quite a niche thing, you know, and it still had an overlay with like early 2000s hip hop. It hadn't really matured out and become its own like way of communicating yet, you know.
When, if ever, did you get exposed to like real US / Japan streetwear? Like I'm talking Stussy,
Evisu,
or Revisu, yeah, or like Bape, like.
It all happened around the same time, between the age of like 13 and 15. I mean, because I lived in the end, so really the only part of that I got to see was through like TV. Yeah. A lot of the time as well.
Like music videos or something.
Yeah,
like that.
so like artists like Pharrell, they were like a lot of references which were so alien from what I actually grew up in, being from like the UK. Like I was born in London, moved out to what we call the countryside, which is just like nothing. There's nothing there apart from estates. Literally nothing. And you never saw an element of wealth unless it was through TV. Yeah. So I'd see all this stuff on TV, like Bape, people wearing yada 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 yada, Evisu, whatever, at the age of like 13, 14. But as soon as that TV is turned off, it was almost like back to reality. Yeah. It was so far away and so unattainable that there was never any inclination that I would be A, able to move into fashion, B, have some type of influence on a specific culture, or C, even have this type of conversation. That just was not even something you would think about ever. Yeah. Like, it just didn't happen, you know? Right. So it's hard to... There was no real, like, immediate crossover. For me, this whole dialogue came through literally the discipline of design. Yeah. You know, and of course... crossing paths with Virgil was a big point where I really entered, I'd say, fashion as a whole, just interning and helping out before going on to becoming assistant role or whatnot. That was a real crossover. Paris was big, but it wasn't the first instance. It was more so the pivotal turning point, you know?
So this is working with Virgil was pre a Coldwall.
Yeah. So
even in your head, like Coldwall wasn't even born in your brain yet.
no, not at all. Like I think up until so basically I worked for Virgil for like 3.5 years before Off-White actually started. So this was the interim of like Pyrex had just gone a bit quiet, and we crossed paths by like email and Instagram actually, and I was just like assisting him on like several projects, whether that be artwork for like Bin Trio, whether it be like show work for Yay or whatever. I was working through him on a lot of projects like Shane Hood by Air stuff.
Yeah.
And that eventually grew into a full-time role where I became his right hand, and I was traveling like Europe a lot of the time with him and whatnot. But at that same time, I was still working normal industry jobs.
Like what?
Like I was at like an ad agency in London called Story Worldwide, and they actually got absorbed by Aesop, and by the product design agency. So I was still like doing normal 9 to 5 stuff. That was still very much not part of my life. It was something that I would send work into the email, and it would go out into the stratosphere, and it would come back through in other people's runway shows or whatnot.
Yeah.
But it didn't really become real until I went to Paris. I just took my last couple £100 and then just went over, and that's when it was like, oh fuck, this is real. Like now you're here.
Yeah.
Like walking 4 miles to like the Kanye APC show, and I didn't know about Uber. As I said, I was from the ends. So when am I going to be using the Uber?
Yeah.
Like, I just didn't correlate. So I was walking everywhere the first time I ever went to Paris Fashion Week. Everywhere. My feet were like bleeding and shit. Like, yeah, like, and I just walk everywhere in Paris and assist. And from there, I started to build more friendships with people within the industry. And that's when I'd say it really, like, my career in fashion began at like 21, I'd say. 21, 22 is where it really began.
And was that sort of your employment was through Donda?
And it's tricky the way they'd say it. I mean, I had like NDAs on contracts with both V and with Donda. And I mean, of course, Virgil assisted who he assisted too.
Yeah.
And I would work on anything that came that he wanted me to work on.
So was it like very nebulous? Like
yeah, it was everything.
Yeah,
so it was from like stage design for this rapper over here to this brilliant contemporary artist to like, you know, album artwork to collections for like any designer who was within that team or the wider spectrum. There was a lot of like contributions and ghost work as well that I do, which I was completely fine with because of course I come from the background of actual discipline. So you were expected to work and not get any credit. You just were happy to work. You know, I just wanted to work and learn.
Right.
And I knew that I was new to that field. But of course my background in product design helped, and just honestly, you know how this goes, knowing every single program in Adobe Suite, knowing like Cinema 4D to Premiere Pro to After Effects.
You could
really,
actually
really
execute
well.
every idea.
So I could do like the short abstract films and then score it with Logic Pro. And then do like the graphic lockup in the EPS file and send it off to Japan. That was fine. I could do the whole thing, and that really played a massive role in being able to work across all these fields.
But you were working remotely.
Yeah, I was working remotely. So I was doing this from like Northampton. So a lot of early graphics that I've seen throughout a lot of collections, I was like hand painting them in Northampton, a random part of England, which is pretty cool.
Okay, so how does a kid from there even get his interview with Virgil?
Ah, man.
How did you even get your foot in the door?
So I had like 4 aliases, as I mentioned earlier. I had the streetwear artist, and I had the short film artist. I had my graphic design profile, which is still on Behance now, untouched. Like, this is the amazing thing is this is actually all still on the internet. There's an actual track record of like me getting to a certain point or whatnot.
You're not like deleting these.
No. It's still there. There's a point on Behance where I just stopped posting because you can tell, okay, he's probably like doing okay now or whatever. But I guess like just through sheer will, like reading Wikipedia pages of how other artists got their entry into the industry, like working next to or trying to get in touch with the creative directors or visionaries behind brilliant artists across the board. I was just researching and reading a lot. And I feel like I was just like delusional enough to think this could maybe happen. So I just kept emailing, sending my CV through like the RSVP website, no reply, sending my CV to like all types of blogs that I knew great minds were involved in, no reply. And then I saw Virgil's Instagram, and I was sitting in my chair in this product design company in Leicester,
Uh-huh.
and I thought, is there any point in me even pressing follow? What's the fucking point? Like, what's the point? Like,
Okay, of following Virgil's account.
yeah, because I
Okay.
thought, because obviously I'm just some kid
Yeah.
in Middle England
Mm-hmm.
who's from Ends, who's got himself a grad job, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I thought, why not just follow and see what happens? So I
Uh-huh.
followed him, and he followed me back. And then we got in an email dialogue. I quit my job like 2 days after,
Uh-huh.
and I just moved to my auntie's house back in London and just made it happen.
Wow.
I know that's like a lot
Wait,
compressed
when
into
you
one
followed
sentence.
him,
Yeah,
first of all, it's wild to me that you even had to think about following him.
yeah, because it's
That's
so.
some new generation shit.
Well, this is like
What's the big deal about
4
like how
years
many
ago.
followers did he
No,
have?
because
He must
it
have
was
50,000,
yeah,
100,000?
it wasn't. It was less than 100, but it was more so like I still had this like mindset of like, okay, I'm in England and I'm far away from this world.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, from my specific background, there aren't many people that have actually crossed over from like working class from nothing into like high fashion and pop culture who are black as well, who aren't necessarily based in London at the time. So if you look at all the other case studies, they tend to all move into London and then they get their meteoric rise. And I was outside of London at this point, based outside, so I had that counter against me as well. And at the end of the day, I just thought, well, I've got nothing to fucking lose. Like, let me just like follow this guy and just appreciate his artwork.
Did you message him after you followed
Nah,
him?
he just started liking my photos and then
You followed him and then he just straight
yeah,
followed back.
yeah. Like it was like he must have been on his phone at the same time, which is like the chances of that are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And he must have got some of my emails though, because then he emailed me, and yeah, I was like, yeah, obviously it was a lot more formal. It was very proper.
Yeah, proper, yeah.
yeah, and then I started like assisting or whatnot. And off the back of that email, I quit my job in Leicester, got another job at the ad agency in London, and just stayed at my auntie's yard in Croydon.
But so he offered you a paying job.
No, I used that response from him to get a 7,000 pay increase at an agency based in inner city London, and I used that to then move back into London. Yeah.
What?
It's
Based
all-
off that email,
Yeah.
you just got the confidence to then be like, I need a raise.
Nah. So basically, I was at one agency, right?
Yeah.
When my dialogue with Virgil started.
Okay.
When that dialogue started, I quit that agency in Leicester and got a new job in London based off saying, hey, I've got this new dialogue with a brilliant art director, yada, 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 yada. And then from there, I was scouted and got an increase at a new agency.
Okay.
And I used that cash flow to then move into Croydon on the edge of London.
Right. Closer.
Yeah, to the whole scene
Right.
and culture and happenings of both fashion and design. And then I just grafted.
Wow.
Working like 2 jobs. So I'd work like, of course, 9 to 5 in this agency. Then I'd come straight back and work from like 7 to 2 on anything like Donda related. And that was my life for like a year before the agency was acquired by Aesop. And then I went full time with V and Donda.
What is Aesop?
Aesop is the toiletries brand.
Oh, that brand. Oh, so that
yeah.
brand acquired that agency.
Yeah,
completely.
yeah.
Oh, okay,
Because
cool.
that agency went under.
Okay.
So then they acquired them at a dirt cheap price.
So this is what all the kids listening want to know. After you started communicating with Virgil, how many emails did it take for him to finally offer you a job?
Oh, this was over like half a year period.
Okay.
Like,
Okay, good.
It wasn't quick.
It wasn't like one email. It was like constant.
It was a lot because I was like working throughout this whole process as well.
Yeah, you had a full-time job.
And I think like that, having come from like a couple of agencies before, had a huge impact to basically what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Because there's credible places people can look to see that, okay, this person has actually worked.
Yeah.
It's not just like in it for clout and for hype. It's like, no, like he's actually been in this industry for a little while now.
Yeah, he's somewhat reliable. He's
Yeah,
not crazy.
exactly.
Yeah.
And he's actually about the work, because my thing was always like the work first and then the fun stuff after. Like, and that's still why I don't really go to parties now, because it's always been about the work and the execution of the idea, rather than just being part of like not the community, the scene, let's say, you know,
Mhm.
and they both overlap, but I just feel more comfortable actually executing the ideas, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, okay. That's amazing. The whole story of how Samuel connected with Virgil Abloh, even with thousands of miles separating them, is pretty much a textbook definition of work ethic and hustle. It's hard today to not be enamored by the limelight. It seems everyone on social media has some level of fame. It's like when you go to a party, there's the regular line, the guest list line, and then the people that just get escorted through both. Everywhere you look in life, it's the haves and the have-nots. But if you make your reputation about the work and only the work, you're gonna go places. Yeah, it might take longer, but it will have more substance and longevity. Kanye showed Jay-Z that he was all about the work. And then Virgil showed Kanye that he was all about the work. And Samuel displayed to Virgil that he was also all about the work. Here's the thing too, it's not hard to suss out a bullshitter. Anyone with some years under his belt and a few clicks on the internet will be able to tell if a kid is a con or the real deal. And you could see how the entire body of work these individuals created ain't some passing fad. They're making something that is going to be cemented in our culture forever. You mentioned race just now a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like we're at an interesting moment in people of color, where like coming off Obama as a president, even Meghan Markle and the royal wedding, right? And like I don't know if you saw her pastor's speech.
Yeah, I did.
Like
I did.
just there's a there's a cliche term of a melting pot, but there's definitely some mixing happening, and then like Virgil going to LV.
Yeah.
And even your meteoric rise, where I would say, just even as a person of color, like 5-10 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible.
It wouldn't have at all.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself British first or black first?
I still like battle with this now. I just recently did my ancestry DNA to find out where I'm actually from, and I'm from like Benin.
Where's that?
And Benin and Edo State in like West Africa.
Okay.
Like of course post-slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So I still battle with the idea of what black means.
Yeah.
Because there's no black land to go back to,
right,
as well, which is like a huge thing, and of course, I do feel British because I was born here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's an entire scandal going on now in England called the Windrush scandal, which is talking about the post World War II touting of Caribbean immigrants to come over to England, and what they've been doing, that generation who are now like, late 50s to early 70s, they have wiped a lot of their initial papers to come into the country. And this has been a wider discussion with the Home Secretary to why this has been happening, and what this has resulted in is that generation, I think around 12% of that generation have actually been wrongfully deported back to the Caribbean, and this was not brought to House of Commons or to light until like a year and a half into the process. So that actually does make me question my identity more, because that's my grandparents who were part of the Windrush generation who are actually being deported now. So it puts you in this like weird circumstance where I sound English. I grew up and studied in England. I was born in London. My friends are English. But at the same time, the Black British experience here, I know, is different to the Black American experience. And it just puts you in a situation where I know I am British and I know I am Black, but what that means on a wider scale really hasn't settled yet,
You're still figuring it out, what it means, you mean?
Yeah. It's difficult because I know that I'm British, I know that I'm Black, and I know that I'm also African, I know that I'm also Caribbean.
Yeah.
But to what extent do I have a relationship with some of these places? Like I know, like my stepfather and my father actually moved back to Barbados as well, so we have a really strong tie with the Caribbean. I used to go there a lot when I was a child. My mum grew up there as well, but the reality is that we were like placed there.
Yeah.
Like Barbados was one of the first islands to ever be colonized. So I only have like what 8 generations in Barbados.
Yeah.
Then what?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So I have like I'm not just able to settle with I'm Black British and I'm from the Caribbean. That's not enough for me.
No.
I want to know like
deeper
the
layers.
entire lineage and
the
legacy.
whole onion needs to be peeled.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And how about as it pertains to your professional career now? Like, I know when I sit at a meeting, like with a corporate 100 company,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's different me's at that table, at that conference room table. And I feel like you've now been at a couple of these conference room
Yeah.
tables. And it's like there's me as the designer, which I know that I can stand on my own 2 feet and you can't fuck with what I've done.
Uh-huh.
But then there's me as an American, there's me as a New Yorker, there's me as an Asian American minority.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to get like I have to sort of read the room and see who
Oh, for
they
sure.
think they're talking to.
Yeah, for sure. You have to
You
project.
feel that way?
Yeah, of course. I have
Okay.
to always project. Like, I mean, and sometimes it happens, like, as you know, like, there's like a layer of consciousness to it, but then there's also, you know, how to be quite dynamic in different situations,
Mhm.
as you've explained. So you might see that the room is more of a, like, you know, a working business conservative stance. So immediately that hat just flicks on.
Yeah.
And, you know, your voice or your like body language adjusts and adapts to it.
Yeah,
And I think that's something. If you're like a person of color, you just got to master that
know.
shit. You
Yeah,
just know how to work, not work it, but how to adapt.
Totally.
How to mold.
Because
and
you've been doing
amalgamate
it since you've walked
from
into
day dot.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that's definitely something I'm like super conscious of.
Yeah.
You know?
Let's talk about some of those conference rooms. You know,
Yeah.
so you mentioned that you are doing something with Nike. I mean, going back to the day where you were selling fake Nikes
Yeah,
on
yeah.
your lawn, to then Nike calling you. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
can you recount? Do you remember the day when you got the email or phone call like from the Nike.com person?
Yeah, I remember like I met a really pivotal figure in the Nike Energy team
Mm-hmm.
globally called Sammy Janja
Mm-hmm.
a few years ago, and I actually met him through Zainab, who handles a lot of distribution at Supreme,
Mm-hmm.
who I met through Benji B. So these all came through like having worked for Benji B for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
I slowly built these relationships, and
Benji B is a legendary
of course,
music.
Benji B,
Yeah.
like Deviation,
Yes.
Radio 1, Benji B.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when that moment happened, like, you know, when I first had that conversation that they might want to work on something, it felt so surreal, you know.
Right.
But it's
Like,
weird.
are you serious right now?
Yeah,
Like,
it was crazy because it's like the flashback to you a decade ago, like shot in fake bits outside your yard. It was a completely different circumstance.
Right.
But I also felt like there was this like huge tornado of reality being altered when I was doing work for Donda and Virgil.
Yeah. You had already gotten a skewed reality from that moment.
From that moment,
Yeah.
which was at the age of like 22.
Mm-hmm.
So the shoe happened, the conversation happened when at around 24.
Okay.
I started talking to Nike, and I was actually doing design work for them. So I was doing like packaging for like Kim Jones Nike, season 1. And I was doing Stone Island work, like packaging again, and execution for them at that point too. So there'd been this like slight rapport, and it had grown quite naturally. Once again, it was about me showing I can actually do the work, and then after that, trust was built, and then it grew into like a further project.
Yeah.
So even just to like be able to have that Nike tick in the CAD file for me was like, this is the real deal.
Yo,
it's
I
the
feel
real
you.
deal,
That
man.
swoosh.eps file.
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck?
I will never delete that because it's just like amazing that they sent me that.
It's like I did like I remember
Because I remember when I used to try to trace it.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, same. It's like, yo, I actually have the real thing, like the real thing, you know. It's like the first time I got like the Stussy fonts. I did some work for them for like Benji B and a few other people as well. Like Theophilus London, I was his creative director for a while too, around like the time of the Vibes album.
Yeah.
And that was surreal having like the Stussy font.
Yeah.
Again, it was that moment of like, whoa, once someone kind of hands you that small element of control, that's when it really sinks in.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. But yeah, the Swoosh Illustrator file I have is like Illustrator 5.0. It's like so old, but like
Yeah, yeah,
I'll
yeah.
never delete that file. And then talk about some of the work you're doing with Oakley. That's also like a shared, like we do a lot of work with
Yeah.
Oakley as well. So when I heard you're working with them, I thought it was dope.
Yeah, like for me, like why I was really excited to work with Oakley is because their standpoint from a technical aspect is brilliant. The technology and the resources they have and their understanding of fabrics. And for me, the outdoors, which is something I've had a slight interest in. I make jokes with my team, like the older I get, the more I get into like the outdoors.
Yeah.
And I had this idea of being able to introduce a inner city protagonist into the outdoors and tell that in a very conceptual and artistic way. And I felt like Oakley was the perfect place to tell that story authentically.
So you sought Oakley out, or Oakley sought you out?
Oakley sought me out,
Okay.
and then we had this dialogue for like half a year. When I felt like I had something that I could actually bring to Oakley that felt right, then the relationship came into fruition. And it's really been for me about making garments that embody the idea of survival. Like, say if you were to get stranded in like up a mountain or in the wilderness for 2 to 3 days, could you survive in the clothing that I have produced for you?
Right.
So there's very much a sense of like it's the function before anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the idea of being able to like you know, take a coat, like a long coat, and pull it into two pieces, then form like a blanket from it. Like those type of ideas.
Yeah.
Reflective materials are actually pretty decent at insulation for heat. Those are factors I'm looking at with the Oakley collaboration. It's a brilliant chance for me to just be focused on design that serves,
Yeah.
rather than telling an artistic narrative. There are elements of art that come through Oakley in the installations, like the latest installation I did in Copenhagen, where we had these huge boulders that were painted bright red, and there were these industrial ropes that were suspended from the ceiling. And the idea was to recreate an abstraction of the mountaintop which could be passed through, and the ropes and the boulders helped to create these confined spaces that also, when looked at from a slight angle, appeared to make the same slants and angles you'd see from a mountaintop. So that's me being creative, but it's still a lot more of like a geeky technical lens on it.
Right,
you know.
right. Is there eyewear involved as well?
Yeah, there was one piece in season 1 which goes into store in June, July this year, and season 2 there are around 2 to 3 styles that we're working on. That's been a whole new frontier, which has been really exciting. For me as well.
Right. It's dope to be able to make eyewear with like
Oakley, the gods of it.
Yeah, the gods, instead of trying to do some
Yeah,
Chinese glasses or something.
Yeah, like I held off. I was like, nah, I'm gonna hold off until I can get in that room. I'm gonna hold off. That.
Yeah. So it must be. I mean, you mentioned about how surreal it is now to be working with these companies, and from back then, when you first started a Coldwall, was it totally self-financed by you?
Yeah, there's no funding at all.
Okay.
Like zero.
And how did that go in the beginning? Were you profitable right from the get?
Fortunately, yeah. But I started from like having 3 products and putting a made-to-order prompt in line with that, and that enabled me to have like the smallest amount of cash to then flip the cash and put it into right categories and right products.
So you didn't pre-produce inventory?
No.
You designed 3 things and then got orders and then made those 3 things?
Yeah, and it was fucking stressful, but that's what I did.
Did you deliver those things like on time and properly?
I tried to.
Yeah.
That's like you got me there.
Well, no, that's usually
that's
the usual.
That's the
problem.
truth.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I was operating out of like a random rented bedroom in like the middle of nowhere, trying to like make it happen because I just left working for Off-White and Donda at this point, and because I felt like I had a story that I could tell.
Yeah.
And that was a Coldwall. So I just pretty much put all my resource into it, which at that time was like, I think I started with like £200 for a Coldwall. Yeah.
£200.
Yeah. So that was
which,
enough.
by the way, that's like $350 US.
Yeah. So that was enough to buy me like a couple blanks.
That's like how much your sneakers for Nike to cost.
Yeah. yeah.
Okay, so you bought a couple blanks.
Yeah, a couple blanks at first, which I didn't hide. They were printed on Champion. And I felt like there was like a legacy in other brands that had come before and used Champion.
Yeah.
That's why I chose to use Champion to start with. And I was overdying them myself in this rented apartment's like kitchen, like just with like buckets and shit.
Yeah.
So it was like super like like really like hands on.
Yeah.
It was definitely an art project. It was not a business at this point. I remember the first set of orders, I printed out an A4 piece of paper on inkjet and like signed each one.
Yeah.
So I'm sure
Someone's
kids,
got it.
they still got it, like
Yeah.
the first ever stuff.
Did you discuss with Virgil that you were gonna do this thing and leave?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I discussed that I had this idea.
Yeah.
That like I've got this like idea I want to tell, because I believe that the first instance of ACW coming to light was actually a few months before I left.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember I did a panel with Virgil in Selfridges. This was like 5 years ago now, and we were speaking about ACW to like a group of people who of course attended the panel with Selfridges at like a round table.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was there, but it was really just like a couple long sleeves.
Yeah.
And I was just explaining what it's going to be and what this kind of represents, but
Mm-hmm.
it was insanely abstract because of course the product didn't match up to the intensity of what I was saying.
Right.
And then after that I kind of thought, you know what, let me see what I can do with this and treat it solely as a art project. You know, I've like looked at other designers and icons I look up to, and they always started their notion as a project before a business.
Yeah.
And that was really key to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and at this time I've just quit Donda and working for V.
Yeah.
So it's like this shit could go real bad.
Yeah.
As well. It could just be like the end and then I'm back to the ends and then nothing else.
Yep.
Like that could have been my exit from everything. But I felt like it was just time to tell like a story that was quite close to me and that only I could tell.
But wasn't there a part of your brain that said, I'm just gonna work for V and Donda for the rest of my life and I'll be one of the luckiest motherfuckers on earth?
Yeah, but I feel like, I don't know, like you get so inspired by being around people who are great at what they do that, I mean, the whole purpose is each one teach one, right? Mm-hmm. So this is me doing my job by leaving and then like passing that baton onto someone else who can come in and learn and then go and do their thing, or stay and be like the most great assistant ever and help those artists exalt, you know? But I felt like I'd kind of done my bit and it was probably time for someone else to come in and start learning, and this really like syncopated at the same time that I was starting to form what I wanted to say with a Coldwall, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's almost like with the amount of inspirational jet fuel you were getting soaked in, you had to.
It was the confidence
eject
as well, because you know when you see and when you're part of people who just live fearlessly through their ideas, you just pick up those. If you don't pick it up, you just die and get dropped off. It's one or the other.
Yeah, right.
You know, you either like adapt and you run with the pack, or you don't.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's one or the other.
Right.
You know, and to be honest, I know myself as well, man. I always want to be like able to say like, this is something that I brought in and contributed wholeheartedly.
Right, right.
You know, as well as support others. I wanted to really I just wanted to say more than, hey, I helped this person execute their vision.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I wanted to deliver a new story as well.
Yeah, you didn't want to be the best supporting actor. You wanted to be...
that's not me, man. That's not me.
This idea that Samuel speaks about is pivotal to his career. Each one, teach one. He was surrounded by such iconic people. It was either sink or swim, and he swam. But then he got to the point where he had the next big question. Keep being a supporting character in the system, or venture out on his own? The pros and cons are crystal clear, right? Stick around and, hey, you're in an incredible creative ecosystem that you can probably live well on for the rest of your life. It's stable, paid, rewarding. Can't ask for much more than that in life. Leave and do your own thing? Complete creative freedom, sure, but also a very possible outcome of total failure that sends you all the way back to square one. Unstable, no clear idea of how much you'll make, and the possibility of crippling your reputation and confidence. To each his own. Only you can answer this question for yourself. I mean, hey, Tinker Hatfield spent decades working for one employer. Could he have started his own shoe brand? Sure. Where would it be today? That's a big question mark. So there's not necessarily a correct or incorrect answer here. It's more about doing what is right for your soul. Have you been to Selfridges recently?
Yeah.
Okay, so how crazy is it?
It's mad.
Because you just said, like, you did a talk at Selfridges and name dropped a Coldwall as, like, a conceptual concept.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I was just in Selfridges this weekend, and you're on this like 5 foot rotating panel.
Yeah.
It's fucking mad.
Yeah, the sell-through for this season has been absolutely mad there. We've been top seller for like 27 days in a row for men's contemporary. And I know this because I know kids who work on the shop floor, so I'm actually hearing what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Which is good, and it's just mad because, of course, the Selfridges, man. You know what I mean? It's just, it's just like Selfridges.
Right.
Which is just really surreal.
Mm-hmm.
But what feels good about everything that's come to pass is that my intent was not, I'm gonna make this brand and make lots of money. It was always like, no, I want to tell this story and I don't want to compromise.
Yeah.
And I still feel like I haven't had to compromise any of the ideas that have been put forward for a Coldwall.
Yeah.
It's still got the like hyper abstract videos and like the really like esoteric references.
Yeah.
You know, nothing's had to really been compromised. Of course, you learn how to expand a story into a brand, into a business, which of course generates capital. And we're doing like very well. Like, I don't even mind talking figures. Like the last season, we did like 3.5 million for men's. I hit my first million like last year. So there's definitely like an intent of being aware and in tune with a product that works for a consumer, but that's grown organically.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
I would have been happy doing this if we were only doing like 100K a season. Like, I'd still be happy.
Right.
You know.
But the growth has been phenomenal.
Yeah, the growth's not bad still.
Did you at those early days, did you ever get yourself into debt?
No, I didn't. You know, not for Coldwall. No.
Wow. That's
I've been in like personal debt when I was a kid, like just not knowing how to work with finances.
Yeah. But not because of Coldwall.
No, never.
That's
never.
amazing.
By
Did
the
you ever
time-
have to use credit cards to like?
No,
you know,
we had like an overdraft that came in late, but we never actually used it.
Nice.
Because of course, there was no reason for banks to lend me any money. Like,
Yeah, why? I know.
like
You're trying to explain to a banker a Coldwall is like.
Actually, do you know what? Look at my selective memory acting up now. Andrew and I had a t-shirt brand when we were in university, when we were 19 years old, and this is when the hundreds was in its peak.
Okay.
And we sold to 2 retailers, and we got into like 2K worth of debt. And I was like 19 years old.
A different name.
Completely different brand.
What was
like
the name of that brand?
It was like super abstract. It was like 24, but it was spelled 2WNT4.
Okay.
So everyone was calling it Twanta, and I was like, this ain't working, you know. It was just too much. But
Right.
then from that, I was still studying, so I kind of axed that brand at that point at 19 and went back into studying and into industry rather than like try and take an idea that wasn't working. I wasn't ready. I was realized I wasn't ready. Let me go back and do my research and work, you know?
Yeah.
So by the time Coldwall had come about, there were none of those mistakes at all.
Right.
We've never been in debt. You know?
And you called Andrew back.
Yeah, that's like my boy. Like, you know, we've worked together for like a decade now.
What was he doing when Coldwall came back? Like, or came?
You know, he actually was working for Virgil as well.
Oh, okay.
So the plot thickens.
So you poached from Virgil too, like.
Yeah, well, it's
you stole an
interesting because
employee.
I was like, I mean, when I started working for V, he needed an assistant to help him with more like the normal stuff on retail. So I was like, hey, there's a close friend I have who I trust. I've worked with him previously. He might be a good fit. So this was like 6 months into when I started working for V. So then Andrew came into the fold as well. I didn't want to like, because obviously if you're from where we're from, it sounds really crazy to say it and so disconnected, but that is potentially like an opportunity that can change your whole life and pull you out of a whole class system or a sense of poverty.
Yes.
That's the reality.
You're right.
And people are not going to say this on the comments, but there is a truth to, there are individuals in this career path that we're in that can really help people and are helping people. You know, and for me to have come from such like a disconnected and distant background to not try to help one of my closest friends, I would have been a snake in my eyes because it's almost like I'm running off with an opportunity and not trying to bring people who have helped me
Mm-hmm.
along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And now you fast forward like, 5 years from then, Andrew and I head up a Coldwall, and I couldn't do it without him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it's very important that, I guess your intentions are in the right place.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be about, I'm doing this because I want to be associated, or what does that actually do for your quality of life? Nothing.
Right.
So there's always been this wider picture of like just wanting to be able to give back opportunities and support people who have supported you.
Right.
It's like a global mantra a lot of people live by.
Yeah. How do you and Andrew separate the roles and responsibilities?
I think it's fell quite naturally. So I work, of course, primarily pretty much independently on design.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to retail, that's more Andrew's side, and we often group after he has like an idea, and we'll refine if we need to on what retailers are right, what we need to do, and what our strategy is comprised of for a season. But Andrew is a figures guy.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew's very good with numbers, so that's his forte.
Okay.
And he's just learnt that on the way and got really, really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to any type of decision making, it will be myself, Andrew, and our right hand Yi, and the three of us pretty much are the nucleus of the Coldwall. We've grown it up from the early days. Like the Coldwall started off, at least for the first, I'd say about the first 10, 11 months, it was just me independently. And then once the e-commerce store started to turn a small profit, and I realized it might be viable for a business, then Andrew got involved. Half a year on from then, when we had one or two retailers, then Yi got involved. And now I believe we're going into our AW delivery with around 107 retailers globally. So these two have been key to like the growth and the momentum, but it's definitely like a family.
Yeah.
As I said, this is all we do.
How did you know after you got your e-com store open that you needed somebody? Like, what told you that, like, I can no longer do this on my own? I need to call Andrew on the bat line and help. What was the thing that, like, told you needed help there?
I think it was like, I think there was two options. There was the first option to sustain it as a small indie project and maybe like do like 10 to 15k a month or whatever, and just maintain myself. And then there was the second option of seeing that I don't know if it was necessarily help that I was asking for, but it was the opportunity to grow it with someone. I kind of saw it as, hang on a minute, I might have something here, and this is someone I know I can grow this project or potential business with. And from there, it just felt like a natural fit. I'd handled money with Andrew for years.
Okay.
So I trusted him as well.
But you as a creator of this brand also must have recognized that, like, I'm going to have to give up X, whatever it is. Maybe it's a percentage of shirts, percentage of the company. Like, the amount of money you make will now be split. Or,
for sure.
But you felt like that was fully worth it at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we only really started to talk about splitting it and what that split would be once we'd hit over a certain point. But what we did make sure is that we were both paid like equally, for sure.
Okay.
In terms of like salaries and stuff like that.
Okay.
Because we were both putting in our life's work into
dope.
it.
So right from the get, you and Andrew were like equals in terms of like salary, which usually means equal in terms of like just stature in the company.
Yeah, I mean, in terms
of two people, two of two. So
I mean, in terms of both, there's always been like this real like straightforward balance. Like that's my brother. So when it came to like money and business, we always split it like down the middle. And I think that kind of applied to a Coldwall as well. Like Andrew has a good stake of ownership in the Coldwall, and I own the majority, but he has like a good stake that we both sat down and were like, yeah, this is right. And that, I mean, it's very important that you're just honest with one another, so that you can grow from friends into business partners. Because there's sometimes we fucking hate each other. But that's so important that we can be at that point, and know this is business and this is not our friendship. Because of course, like there's times I used to sleep on Andrew's like attic floor. Like for a long time. like there's real life shit.
Yeah.
Will always keep you humble that you just don't
Right.
forget. Like I remember when I couldn't afford to live in London because of course it's so expensive. So just to give you some background info, I moved, I think within a 4-year period I moved 14 times across the country.
In the last 4 years?
I settled about a year and a half ago.
But before that, you moved
before
14
that,
times?
before a Coldwall stabilized, I moved 14 times in like 3 to 4 years. So that was like in random towns, just so I could commute into the city, just to be in Ace Hotel every morning, just to have a chance encounter, or to be at the right party, to bump into the right person, or whether it was moving to like an entire different city like Leeds and commuting down every single day.
Wow.
Just to find a way to make it work. And this is like the beginnings of a Coldwall. So it's funny, you'll see like it's interesting because you live in this space when you're trying to like make it or make things happen, where you'll get an email about a late order, but then there's not an understanding that you're literally living in an attic.
Yeah. Right.
Trying to make this idea happen.
Yeah.
And that only really stabilized, I'd say, like 2.5 years ago. But whilst going through that entire process, because I came from nothing, I felt like I had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So it was fine.
Right.
Like I was never miserable. That was just like the life I'd lived.
Yeah,
like it would be an extreme of like going over to Paris Fashion Week and working on like the Kanye APC show, and then going and working on like Hood by Air, runway shoot for them in Rick Owens' apartment, to coming back to like the middle of nowhere in England, like renting or dyeing garments in like some random kitchen.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Which had nothing to do with anything related to fashion or design or affluence at all.
Yeah.
And I lived like between that balance for years.
Wow. It's hard for creatives sometimes to like take something that you birthed and then sort of quantify it into saying like, all right, this is probably worth this much, and so you deserve that. That's like one of the hardest things to do, and I find it an accomplishment that you as a young creative were able to do that with Andrew. And I was going to segue into like the Tomorrow deal, right, which is like you've now brought in another partner as well. So it's like, for me, from my personal experience, like I didn't bring on any partnerships until 15 years into the business because of how I couldn't, maybe I was like a control freak, but B, like I couldn't put a number on the worth, and if you can't do that, then you can't decide how much to give this person.
For sure.
But you were able to just sort of coldly say like, this is worth this, hey, you deserve this and you deserve that.
And I think that speaks to like my personality is like really sporadic, but also like incredibly strategic, and I'll kind of make decisions with like a 3 to 5 year plan in mind at every single point. And with Tomorrow, it was just it felt we worked with them just on distribution.
Yeah, they were a sales showroom for you guys, right?
Yeah. So we worked on distribution with them for around 7 to 8 months. And then we started talking to them about working on production, and that was a huge help in allowing a Coldwall to pierce past almost what would become a stigma of like this streetwear brand trying to make clothes to actually having access to luxury Italian production. As an independent brand, I remember there was a moment, it was Yi, myself and Andrew, we were actually standing right here, and I'd just done one of my mad ideas, which was like a super spontaneous pop-up, concept-led, so everything was free at this pop-up, so we made no money from the pop-up at all. No money. I gave out everything for free.
Okay.
And it was like book bags, caps, printed school books, and it was basically an art installation and a case study on the unwavered gap, or the wavering gap between leaving school and moving out into like the free world, and that unease between that point. So this was almost supposed to be like a subversive encouragement that you can do it or whatnot. Super abstract. Only I really got it, which is fine. I wrote a whole dissertation on it. Like one person has read it. It's fine.
Right.
And after we did this pop-up, which was hugely successful, they were like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, do you want this to be an abstract art project, or do you want this to be a high fashion brand? And we had this huge heated debate. And I was like, we can be both.
There's no difference.
Be both. Yeah. But then, of course, my team, who are like the rational minds, were like, you need to make a decision. Now, with tomorrow, fast forward like 4 to 5 months from that point, where we felt like we'd reached a plateau in we can't pierce through high fashion.
Yeah.
We ended this conversation with tomorrow, and it was like a super organic relationship with my partners, who are now Giancarlo and Stefano from over there, and they understood what we wanted to do. They'd worked with like Raf Simons before me. They'd worked with Helmut Lang before me. Of course, Renzo Rosso is also involved in tomorrow. So there was this like whole sphere of experience that we didn't have, and they were able to see what I was trying to execute and how they could help me restructure and refine the end product.
Yeah.
And that comes from, just general advice in, hey, you need to go and get things made here, to, hey, I think you should have a conversation with these people over here, to making sure the right people were seeing what I was trying to communicate.
Yeah.
And at that point, it really felt like the team had been completed. We were missing that one component, and we kind of had this lucid idea that maybe there's like a gold pathway in fashion or some type of mecca, but we don't know.
Yeah.
We're just gonna keep doing what we're doing, and being like a British brand coming from where we'd come from. No one had really passed over that point.
Yeah.
Not going through fashion school.
Yeah. Right.
So, but we just kept doing it, and it just aligned, and we found the right partners to do so. But another reason I was doing these erratic pop-ups is because I was actually basically doing litmus tests geographically throughout the world, to see what the pull of a Coldwall was, to see where we needed to improve, and to see how we could improve our communication.
Yeah.
So, for example, the pop-up where we gave everything out for free, we pulled 700 people, maybe 600 people to that one location within 12 hours notice. And this was me overthinking and being over strategic, and it was a retaliation to actually not getting a feature on a specific fashion publication because they didn't feel we were big enough. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make a statement, and I'm going to pull 700 people to one place and shut down this entire area if you think I'm not big enough and I can't do it.
Right.
And then from there, things started to change.
Interesting.
So I very much felt like the underdog, not in like the wider spectrum of designers, but more so in London at this point. I knew I was an outsider, but I also knew how to talk to normal people, not just the fashion elites. So I really used that to turn a current, to continue to stir this cult. So, for example, that type of pop-up, I'd go and I'd just talk to everyone. And like sign CDs and stuff, and just be like about. Because these are normal people like me. Why not? Like, I've always had this thing about like respecting anyone who's interested in the brand or what I'm trying to do. And I think that's really that respect, rather than just trying to sell people shit, that has really helped build the ACW cult.
I think also what it did was those pop-ups showed whoever your potential partners were going to be how you fuck with this shit, like how you just do it differently, so that when they become your partner, they're not surprised by some of the more esoteric, like out of the box things that you're doing. Like they already knew that he made a store and gave everything away for free. We know what we're getting into bed with already. And
it was funny because at that point, like, of course, we're completely independent. We've just done like, that was a week after our runway show, so we couldn't even really afford to be doing shit like that. But it's funny because that led to a variation of the cap I gave out for free actually trended online, and the amount of sales we got from that cap was ridiculous. That
after
month.
giving them away, some of them away for free.
It was ridiculous.
Wow.
And that sustained us to a certain point which we needed. I mean, really, it's just been about like figuring out ways to talk to communities that aren't usually spoken to a lot of the time through these pop-ups as well. I feel like there's like a humanitarian tinge in a Coldwall, or what I try to do with it.
prior to you deciding that you're doing this, you're going to bring on tomorrow as a partner,
Yeah.
there must have been some level of trepidation. Or, right? I would assume that there had to be like a real reckoning with yourself that, like, am I really going to do this? Or was it not? Was it just like, yes, they're the partners, let's sign this?
You know what? There was an element of that, but I thought, do you know what I did? I actually detached myself from it a little bit and thought, this project and this brand and this story and narrative has not existed before from someone who's been in the sandbox, and it needs to exist. It's actually bigger than me. Now, the
Gotcha.
deal was brilliant. It's fair. They own like a good stake, but it's not 50%, and it's not a majority stake either, but it's fair. And I feel like just working for them for the duration of just under a year, we gelled quite well.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, you were like dating before you got married.
for a long time.
Yeah.
On several fields, and it just was a really good pairing. You know, for what they want to achieve and what I want to achieve, and I think that was the biggest distinction between, you know, other brands that don't partner or feel like the partnership isn't right. I knew, and myself and my team knew, we wanted to enter luxury fashion.
Yeah.
That became the new, you know, mission in a sense. Once we realized we've made this like esoteric lucid art project,
Yeah.
we then decided, wait a minute, this story, this narrative, and these ideas are good enough to exist in this context. And as it hasn't existed before, there's actually a reason and a space for it to exist. Therefore, there's a purpose for it.
Yeah.
Therefore, we should actually pursue this.
Right.
It wasn't like a carbon copy. It's like, no, there's actually an intent here that needs to be told. And that is where the idea of scalability came into play.
Before we signed off, I wanted to ask Samuel a topic in fashion that is rarely spoken about. Is there a wall built around the fashion world, particularly luxury fashion, that maybe holds certain people back? It's always been an unsaid dirty secret, but who better to ask than a kid from the hood who came all the way to the highest levels of luxury fashion? Is there, in your experience now that you've played from sort of like DIY fashion to street to luxury now, is there there's a perception of this, so I'm wondering from your point of view, is there a guarded, walled, like castle that is protected from the outside, and someone like yourself, which comes from no connected family, or like, you know, your mom wasn't the editor of so and so magazine, like for people like you, is there a wall?
Yeah, there's multiple
walls.
It's
right?
classist as well over here, so
Class,
that's something.
race, money, connection.
Yeah.
And so without, you know, those things, the likelihood of you scaling all of those barriers is like really nearly impossible.
Yeah, to like
it's not based on skill set, is it?
It's based. Do you know what's difficult though? If I didn't study and get like a first class degree in design, there's no way this would have happened.
So you needed that first seed.
Yeah,
of
I needed education. I needed education.
Right.
To even be moderately exposed to like a door slightly opening.
Yeah, but I believe that was your way. I think there's other ways. Not everyone who made it in got it through graphic design, right?
No, but they got it through Parsons, or they got it through architecture school.
Yeah.
A lot of the time too.
Yeah.
So there's often like this like common thread of, usually, not always, but usually, those who manage to break past the barrier of simply being in a good place in design or employed in design tend to have studied.
Yeah.
So if you look back, there's like Heron went to Parsons, for example. V studied and got his masters too. Like there tends to be like this this thread which is still quite important, and I think what happens is the idea still needs to align with the rules of that discipline. And usually it's when it doesn't even have to be degree level, it's just courses or anything. Once those disciplines, like golden ratio for example, are actually implemented, it's more like a different respect for a field of design or creativity rather than just like an artist, which is completely different. You can obviously, people train to be artists. My father like got first class painting at St. Martin's. So that's a different story. But but no, there's definitely this thread of like Yoon, for example, studying as well. There's a respect for design that is passed through education, and I think that is a connecting dot. You know?
Yeah.
And without that, I might have just been like a really creative kid, but it wouldn't have translated into like a mature, concise execution of ideas necessarily.
Right,
you know?
right. So I guess your advice to a kid is stay in school.
Yeah, I always say study, man, because for me, studying got me out the ends.
Mm-hmm.
So that was me getting away from home.
Right.
And not necessarily away from home. I wouldn't say, because I come from a good home, but I'd say away from like the hood.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way to put it. Like before I went in to uni, I had like a court case for a GBH and a fray.
What is that?
It's just basically fighting or whatever. And I got guilty on it as well. So when I went to go to uni, they flagged me when I went in, and I had to have a security interview. I'm not like a bad kid at all. I haven't done like complete madness or anything like that. I don't like, I'm not from like the roughest side ever, but just being in that environment, that was like a normal thing.
Yeah.
But of course, going into like a higher education environment, which is much more middle class,
You could be a problem.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like, so really leaving home to go to uni, for me, I would say is where my life completely changed its trajectory. Like, totally. I remember going to uni and thinking, why the fuck are these people so happy? Like, people are just happy. Whether it be like a house party and people like smiling. I'm used to people just stand up on the wall being pissed off, like,
Right.
do you know what I mean? Like, it was a whole
spying people.
Yeah, like it was a whole different world that I was exposed to.
Yeah.
You know, and now like, it almost feels like I live like a second life.
Yeah.
You know.
Are you seeing that that world again? Like, where now that you're entering into the second evolution of a Coldwall, are you entering environments in the high fashion world where you're like, this ain't where I came from? Like,
yeah, it's strange.
It must be, right?
Yeah, it's like, it's not really things you could have ever like depicted or drawn or scribed. You know, it's so surreal, but I still feel like I have like that blurred lens from when I first like worked with Donda.
Yeah.
That from there it was all skewed. Like it was just
Right.
all skewed.
You're living in dreamland.
Yeah, because I used to watch like YouTube videos of all these guys and Viva and follow the blogs, and I was literally watching on the internet. Like,
yeah,
I wanted to be in and contribute to like that design zeitgeist moment so badly. I was like one of the kids on HYPEBEAST. I weren't commenting, but I was one of the kids on HYPEBEAST, checking it every day, being like, oh, I wish I could work for like Shane or da-da-da-da-da. And I ended up working for these people or contributing. So I was literally on the other side of the screen.
You jumped through the screen.
Yeah, the fourth wall was gone, you know? And for me, that is still like the biggest like mindfuck. That if you just persevere, you can actually do it.
Yeah.
You know?
That's amazing.
yeah. It's really weird
Word.
to even think about, but that's still beyond like all of the new environments I go into, which are phenomenal. That moment was really like the red pill, blue pill moment for me.
Right. All right, I think that's dope.
Yeah, wrapped up.
Yeah, that was a great way to wrap it up.
For sure.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of The Business of Hype with Samuel Ross of A Coldwall. You can find out more about the show and listen to other episodes at hypebeast.com/radio. And subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. I personally use Overcast. And also, I love hearing your thoughts on Twitter, so definitely reach out to me. I'm at jeffstaple. You could also check us out on the web at businessofhype.com, and you could email any questions to questions@businessofhype.com. The Business of Hype is directed by Daniel Navetta. It's been edited and produced by Bright Young Things. You can check them out at byt.nyc. Engineering is by Alexander Christensen, and our intern is Carolyn Cow. Our producers at HYPEBEAST Radio are Ben Rosen and Jay Chung. You should check out our other shows on HYPEBEAST Radio. The HBR Show, hosted by Ben Rosen, and Soundcheck, our new music show hosted by Manny Meduculum. This was recorded at Sibling Rivalry Studio and on location in London, England. I'm Jeff Staple, and you've been listening to The Business of Hype on HYPEBEAST Radio.